Pastor Marvin here with you from Step of Faith Ministries. It's been a while since we last talked or had a conversation, but I wanted to talk to you sooner with the current situations that we find ourselves in as a nation. But the topic was so hot that I didn't trust what would come out of my mouth, being that my emotions were strongly attached to the situation. So I figured that I would wait until I could have a conversation with you about the current state of affairs without attaching my emotional state of being along with it. Over the last 2.5 weeks, the nation, matter of fact, let I say the world, has been uprising over the murder that was seen throughout the nation of George Floyd by a monster. I'm not going to say police officer, I'm going to say a monster. And while we were able to witness the murder of George Floyd, there are many other African Americans that their life was taken in about the same way, or they were murdered by other monsters that were running around in the disguise of a police uniform. Take, for example, Keith Childress, Betty Jones, Kevin Matthews, Michael Noel, Leroy Browning, Roy Nelson, Miguel Espinal, Tierra Thomas, Frank Smart. But there's another person who was murdered, and it doesn't fit the narrative that we're seeing over and over, that's perpetuated over our TV screens. And that one was David Dorn. David Dorn was a retired police officer. He served his community for over 30 years. His life was senselessly taken from a looter who shot Mr. Dorn in the head in order to go loot a pawn shop and grab a television. I believe that many of us, as well as myself, have been able to witness the peaceful demonstrations as well as the protests, and people who flat out are saying, I do not come in agreement with calling evil good and good evil. Now, I'm all for protesting. I'm with you as far as protesting. But I have to ask myself the question, and it behooves you to ask the same question. What is our end game for these peaceful demonstrations? What is the goals that we hope to accomplish by protesting and making our voices heard? Notice I said peaceful demonstrations. That means that I've excluded those who are looting, those who are vandalizing people's personal property. Notice that I'm not including those who are protesting and supporting the uprising of the people due to the death of George Floyd by going out and tearing down black businesses. We're excluding all them, and we're just talking about the peaceful protesters that are demanding change. Now, I want to say this. I would consider those who are in power and in a position to make laws, if these people are making laws that promote social injustices toward the African community, if those people who are in power and have the ability to make laws have made laws that have perpetuated systematic racism, if those people are in fact doing those things, I would consider them an enemy. Here's the question that I'm asking, which has some validity to it. Are we protesting in order to get a seat at the table with our adversaries, the people that make these laws that are not in the best interest of the African American community? Are we going there to get a seat at the table with our adversary to ask them, would you please take your knee off of my neck? Are we protesting in order to get a seat at the table with an adversary and ask them, would you please consider redistributing the power that you now have and dispersing it out to the African American community? Are we protesting with the end game of going to the table with our enemy and asking them, would you please be empathetic towards our plight and show a little mercy? Now, if it is true that all of the protesting is leading to getting us a seat at the table to ask our enemy to redistribute the power that they currently hold and distribute it out to the African community, African American community, if that is indeed the case, I'm not quite sure how well this plan was thought out. Just to let you in on a secret, I've been in a slew of fights throughout my lifetime. I can't even count the number of fights I've been in. But one thing that I can count or recount is there has never been a time where I went to the person that I'm fighting and asked them, would you please not hit me so hard in the face? Would you please not kick me in the stomach? Would you please keep your knife and your gun to yourself? I want to pose to you a theory, not a conspiracy theory, but nonetheless a theory. What if what we're seeing take place is nothing more than symptoms? Not to say that what we're seeing take place is new. And just because it's not new doesn't mean that it's right. But what if everything that we're seeing take place is nothing more than symptoms? What if police brutality is a symptom? What if social inequality is a symptom? What if systematic racism is nothing more than a symptom? Would that in fact mean that if all of what we're seeing is nothing more than symptoms, could it be possible that we're looking to make laws and to reestablish new laws that will treat the symptoms that we're currently experiencing as a nation? Pastor Marvin, what do you mean by we're experiencing symptoms? Don't look like symptoms to me. Look like they're bad results. Yeah, you can say that. But what if they're nothing more than symptoms? What if it was really true that we don't need new laws? We just need to live by the laws that were previously given to us. For example, police brutality, symptom. What if the source of that symptom has already been identified? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. What if that is the source and we're watching the symptom from us neglecting the source? What if we're watching abortions? What if we're watching teenage pregnancy? What if we're watching the triangle love affair where one lover gets jealous and kills the person they're loving because they don't want the other person to be loving on them neither? So what if all of those are symptoms from the source, which is a previous law that's been stated that says, thou shalt not commit adultery? You see, what I'm afraid of is that we are protesting in order to lobby new laws that will govern and outlaw the symptoms, but never get to the source. Although I do like what I'm seeing, where people are coming together with one sound, one voice, one agenda, I do believe that this scene will serve us a band-aid. But what if we were able to shift from this scene to this scene? While there are many who would say America is totally screwed up, well, here's news for you. We live in a democracy, which is one of the best forms of government. But it's not the best, but it is the best that we have. And inside of a government, it protects us from living inside of tyranny. So there's checks and balances inside of democracy. And democracy is ran so that the people have the power through the majority of voting to determine what takes place, which is a good thing. Well, here's the deal. Through democracy and through whatever the majority approve of, through that checks and balance system, I would like to pose to you a question today. Do you consider yourself a believer of God? Yeah, you might say, no, I don't believe in God. And I'm here to tell you, yes, you do. You know why you believe in God? Because you believe in His laws. Let me explain. See, democracy means that the majority, whatever the majority wants, that's the way that the country will run, based upon the majority voting for certain issues. Now, if that be the case, let's run through a simple checks and balances. How many of us really enjoy being lied to? I don't, and you don't either, right? Okay, so you believe in what God says, thou shalt not lie. How many of us like for our wife or woman to actually be seeing another man, or for your loved one to be seeing another woman on the side? None of us would like that, right? So you believe when God says thou shalt not commit adultery. How many of us like we leave our wallet or purse on the table and somebody just take it upon themselves to relieve us of our finances that they find within our purse or our wallet? I definitely don't like that one. And you know what? God doesn't like that neither. That's why He said thou shalt not steal. Now, how many of us like somebody hating on us because we got something that they currently don't possess? I can't stand a hater. But you know what? God doesn't like that neither. That's why He says thou shalt not covet. Now, how many of us would like to come home not only to our family, but to see them tied up, and we come through the door, and there's 4 or 5 people in there with guns drawn, and out of the tension that's in the situation, one of them decides to shoot one of our family members, which takes the life of that family member? I definitely wouldn't like that. And God doesn't like it neither. That's why He says thou shalt not murder, right? Now, how many of us would love to be eating dinner with our mother and father, sitting down on a Sunday eating dinner, and all of a sudden one of your brothers comes in and sits at the table and start cursing at your mom and your dad at the loudest voice that they can use? My brother would definitely be in trouble. You know what? God ain't cool with that neither. That's why He tells us to honor our father and mother, right? So, through democracy means what the majority wants is what's decided on. Through us, and what you're saying is that 5 out of the 10 commandments God has laid forth as the moral law you agree with. And a rule of mathematics is 5 or more, it goes higher, correct? So in all actuality, you agree with the 10 commandments. Now that we've come to an agreement that the majority of us are down with God's moral law, meaning God's word, it would do us some good if we could listen to what God says in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and will heal their land. Today, I want to just be straight and honest and straightforward. We're in trouble as a nation, but you know what? That's nothing more than an opportunity we have. And I know I got some good church-going, Bible-thumping theologians that's going to say, that verse doesn't apply to everybody. It just applies to those who believe in God. Well, maybe if those who believe in God can follow God's command in that area, maybe God will heal our land and the unbeliever will see that and desire a relationship with Him. I'm just going to be honest with you. We've tried everything else. We've looked to our left. We've looked to our right. We've looked at our past. We're not getting the 40 acres and a mule. We've looked in front of us. And you know what? We ain't found no remedy. Which leads me to believe that the only place now that we can look is up. Pastor Marvin, Step of Faith. We're going to get through this together. Make it a great one.